circular industries talks and of the Center of Sustainability of the Leiden-Delft-Erasmus Center for Sustainability. Thank you for joining. I see that we already have 14 people in the meeting. Probably some more will join. Today we have David Klein with us, and I'm really happy that he's here. I think he has a very interesting. I think what you just said is that you will try to summarize a 30 years journey in one presentation. David is a sustainable concept designer and product champion in his own words, I think, a teacher at TU Delft, and also an improvisation actor. Well, that's an interesting mix of things, David. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for being willing to share your thoughts on circularity and how we can move from our linear society today towards a more circular society. So the floor is yours, David. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much, René. Well, I'm going to give a presentation about the dream of a circular society, so to speak. But of course, at this moment, we still have a very much a linear society, and that has all kinds of problems, all kind of things to solve first, in my opinion. So my name is David Klein. I've been working in the field of sustainability since halfway the 90s. And I had a lot of disappointments and failures, etc. But I think I used that to increase my understanding over the course of time. And I'll show you some things that I came up with. So here's a bit of my background when I was still designing products. So you can see by the year that it's quite a bit in the past, all of them. So this is teaching the general public some concepts about sustainability. So the first product I designed that had a solar panel in it was already in 2000. At the bottom left, you can see something about separating your waste. It was kind of a CSI criminal scene investigation where children had to find out which garbage was separated in the correct way. So these are the things I did in the distant past. And here you can see kind of a summarizing picture with some of the Design for Sustainability honor group of the TU Delft, together with two of the designs I made, and also with an activist there on the right. So what did I do? I tried to design and produce eco-positive products, so to speak. I taught students at the TU Delft with a strong focus on sustainability. I gave theater shows about sustainability. So I traveled, for instance, to the COP26 in Glasgow, and all along the way I had theater shows speaking to environmentally active people in the UK. I translated a book into English that was about sustainability, which had an interesting concept, in my opinion. I'm writing myself a book that is called The Sweet Spots for Sustainable Happiness for All. And I founded Extinction Rebellion Drechtsteden just a couple of months ago. And we're doing quite well, actually. So really happy with that. Well, some of the more interesting concepts in the later stages of my career as a designer, I kind of stopped designing stuff just when it helps my other businesses, then I still use my design skills, but I don't believe that in design I can really solve our issue with sustainability anymore, unfortunately. I think we need to solve other things first before we can make a difference by designs. So here's the TED, the energizing desk, at which you can have a little bit of physical activity, which is good for your health. And at the same time, you learn something about energy because you are generating electricity to power your products. It's not a lot. It's not having a big impact on your overall footprint, but it teaches you something about the value of energy because most people have no idea what energy is. That was my main focus. This is kind of a test situation. It's not really the product that I was intended to make. And actually the feedback from the tests was pretty positive. As you can see, I did this together with a big company in the Netherlands that provides energy to homes. And it was rather positive, but I could not get it produced. And in 2016, actually, this whole project, which could have had a big positive impact, it failed. It, yeah, they pulled the plug, kind of, had no finance anymore, etc. So here's something about more the social sustainability. Like we have all kinds of VIP-kippen, so we have playground equipment, which is really still the same design as it was in the 50s and 60s, and that does not connect to the children of today. So I tried to do something more interesting, which is more connected to, let's say, what children have at their homes, like iPads, etc. But then for the public environment, same idea. The plug was pulled in 2016. Here's about an innovative way of solar cooking. The plug was pulled in 2016, and well, on the bottom left, you can see something about biomass. Very terrible idea. Not all my ideas are good, good ideas, I have to admit, but some of them are. And all of them, well, the plug was pulled, in my opinion, for the wrong reason. So it's not per se the problem that the plug was pulled, because if you really try to design something new, then sometimes an idea is not as good as you thought it would be. But the reason why the plug was pulled was all the time the wrong reason, in my opinion. Well, the same year this happened, of course, Trump got elected. He did terrible things to the cause for sustainability. Brexit happened in 2016. Well, I'm half British, although I have a bad English day, as you might notice. So my name is David, by the way, not David. But Brexit happened, and all the focus on sustainability was lost after that year. So to summarize, 2016 was a disaster year for sustainable happiness for all. I want to talk a little bit about this word or this phrase, sustainable happiness for all. Why do I mention it like that and don't just say sustainability? Okay. And what's the connection to circularity? Well, in my opinion, and I hope in the opinion of most of you, circularity in itself is not a goal. It's a means to an end, right? We want to achieve a high level of circularity because we hope that that leads to a high level of sustainable happiness for all. And if I break down that phrase, like what's happiness? That it's desirable in the here and now. That's what I mean with happiness. And secondly, that desirability in the here and now does not come at the expense of future generations. So that's the sustainable part. And the third part, it more or less includes everyone. Because if we are really sustainable here in Europe or in the Netherlands or in Dordrecht, where I live, but we don't have a solution for people, let's say in India or in sub-Saharan Africa, then what they will do logically is burn up, for instance, all the fossil fuels that we're not burning up here, because they want to have a high level of sustainable happiness or happiness as well. So we kind of need to take care of everybody. This is really a very much also an Extinction Rebellion thing, that if we want to achieve a high level of sustainable happiness, then we have to be inclusive. So circularity is intended to be a means to achieve the goal that is set above. That's kind of my conclusion. I hope you follow me on that one. And then if we go and look at what can circularity achieve, then I suppose that you know this picture. This is by Babette Porcelein. She did a great job already in 2017 to kind of look at the overall footprint of the average Dutchman and look at it in various ways. So really the overall ecological footprint is charted down, and she came to the conclusion that stuff, or spullen in Dutch, is the biggest impact there is. In a later version, she said, okay, maybe meat is even bigger, but okay, let's agree that stuff has a big impact. And actually, David McKay did the same, but then looking at energy, he did the same in 2008 already. He came to the same conclusion. So stuff is a big thing, and I would say that circularity has a lot to do with stuff. Also with clothing, by the way. So the potential, or let's break it down again. Sustainable happiness for all is more or less the goal we want to achieve, and that circularity is a means with great potential. But can it achieve its potential in a linear global society? Well, there are lots of bad examples, actually. I would say, for instance, this is a bad example, like a playground from wind turbine blades. Okay, it's nice that you have something to do with all the stuff that comes from wind turbines, but you can do this. How many times can you do this? How many playgrounds can you actually produce? And is this the perfect playground, you can ask. So to summarize, what I think is going to happen here is it's simply a case of see you later incinerator. And here's another case. This is one that I investigated personally, because there were a lot of these here in Dordrecht, where I live. And this is the case of 3D printed benches from recycled plastics. And yeah, it's really not a good production method. It's really not a good material for this application. So yeah, already in a couple of years, these benches, all of them, or out of four, were breaking down spontaneously. And meanwhile, our government, our local government, was subsidizing this, saying, hey, look at us, we're being very circular. So yeah, this product is going to break down in the environment. And all of these were removed because of me making a case of this. And if you want to see that discussion, it's quite an interesting discussion. You can look it up in LinkedIn. It had 100,000 or 70,000 views or something. A lot of people angrily reacting on this from both sides. So it was really interesting discussion. Here's a third one. This is, well, Tetra Packs, you know, of course, for milk cartons, etc. There's actually a lot of the environmental impact of Tetra Packs is quite big, but then they make something out of it which normally you would not make. As you can see there on the bottom right, then they 3D print things that you would otherwise simply not make. So I'm kind of summarizing this, that what they do is make pointless products because, hey, the material, you don't have to pay for it. It's basically free. It's waste. Nobody knows what to do with it. Here you have it for free. Maybe even sometimes you get money simply to put it in a product. And then there's a business model for more or less pointless products. And here's another one. This is the energy vault that you haul up, you hoist up weight as a battery, kind of. And they suggested to make it even more sustainable, in their words, they would not use concrete, which of course is 2.5 times the weight of plastics, but they would use recycled plastics. So this, in my opinion, is actually burying plastic, but then above ground. Yeah, how is this circular? It's by the way, a very inefficient battery at the same time. I think it's, yeah, not the best application. So what I kind of did, here's an example of my my theater show, of the poster of my theater show that I had on my road to Glasgow. And I tried to zoom out and really look at our fundamental issue with sustainability. So I had a theater show about that. And this kind of summarizes it, that all the time we're looking for markets to solve our issues. So here of Jeff, of course, is Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and he's discussing all the problems with sustainability with Elon Musk. And they are simply, again, trying to solve all our issues with sustainability by creating a market and let the wisdom of the unregulated market come up with solutions. So I assume that you know this picture, of course. This is by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This is the butterfly diagram. And it kind of tells us, hey, if we want to achieve a high level of circularity, then, well, first of all, we should reuse. Otherwise, we should, well, I don't know it off the top of my head again anymore. Oh yeah, we should first maintain, then we should reduce, then we should refurbish, and then we should recycle. And if all that fails, well, then, okay, then it has to go in the environment. But if you break this down, then actually the linear pathway, that's something that you have economies of scale. You can easily automate it. You can have machines do it. So it looks cheap on the short run, especially because we have access to very cheap fossil fuels. We have very cheap access to energy. But if you look at circular pathways, then they are all, yeah, they're small scale, they're labor intensive, and they seem expensive on the short run. And I say seem expensive because, of course, by definition, on the long run, sustainability is supposed to be cheaper. If you really look at over 100 years' time or 1,000 years' time, then the ecological costs, which are the real costs, the true price of the things we do, is lower. Otherwise, you would not call it sustainable. And the issue is that cutting corners, so not doing it the right way, is the same as cutting costs. And I just collected a couple of examples how you can cut corners. So companies, for instance, will seek out governments that allow them to cut corners. So you have made in someplace, made in India, made in Bangladesh, made in Pakistan, wherever there is a stable government, but it does not look too closely at environmental issues or working conditions, or whatever. So companies will tend to do this. But even if governments, for instance, regulate, for instance, recycled content, then companies will seek the cheapest way to comply. So, for instance, here in the EU, then the tendency is to look at the weight factor of the recycled content. But some parts of the materials, they have a huge environmental impact, but they don't weigh that much. While other parts of the recycled contents, they weigh a lot, but their impact on the environment is not that big. But companies will then say, hey, look at this. We have 90% recycled content, but it doesn't say that much because it doesn't really reflect the true impact. Well, generally, governments know too little too late. So here in Dordrecht, we have the issue of Gimoer, of course. Tata is also an example that governments are always trailing. Consumers, of course, know even less because there's a huge maze of green labels. And well, I would consider myself to be environmental conscious, very much so. But in the end, I'm in a shop and I see all kinds of labels and I don't exactly know where they stand for. And then I basically buy the cheapest product that appears green enough because I don't know even better. So what's currently the solution that a society gives? It says, okay, this sounds all too complex. Consumers don't know what to do. The government does not know what to do. Let the market regulate itself. Well, it doesn't do so. So if I'm zoom out, then how does our decision-making tree look like? First of all, our society asks the question, is it economically viable? If the answer is no in our current market condition, then a product does not reach the market. So something that's good for the general public, that's good for the environment, but it's not economically viable, like clean water when there's plenty of clean water, then the product does not reach the market. So only if all the water is polluted, then you can make a lot of money by producing and cleaning water. So basically, clean water is not protected. So but is it economically viable? Yes. Well, then the next question we ask, is it technologically feasible? If the answer is no, then we still put a product on the market, we sell the dream. So the products that I just showed that were supposed to be circular, technologically, they were pretty imperfect, but the dream is sold. Those companies, they get a lot of money to put something circular on the market. Well, if it's technologically feasible, then the next question is it sufficiently scalable? If the answer is no, then companies can command high prices. So it's actually good if it's not scalable. If it is sufficiently scalable, then we look at, is it socially acceptable? If the answer is no, that the thing we put on the market is not good for society, then companies will tend to slow down legislation. If the answer is yes, it's also socially acceptable, so it starts to look like a pretty good product, and now you can't read it anymore. The next question is it future-proof? Is it sustainable? If it is not, then companies will say, okay, that's not a problem. That's the problem of future generations. And if all the answers are yes, that's the only case in which you could say this product leads to sustainable happiness for all, then the free market had a lucky strike. This does not happen often. Typically, products will fail on one of these 5 questions. So if you look at this again, then we have problems. But I'm a sustainable concept designer, so what's the solution? And I think I found one, and not just me. There are a lot of people who came up to the same conclusion. Instead of creating business cases for circularity, what is basically what we're doing at this moment, we should destroy the business case for linearity. That's what we need to do. But if we then look at how our societies are ruled, then innovation or generally bad products, that is the cause of our short-term problems with sustainability. If we look behind that, we see that it's the unregulated free market economy. If we look behind that, we see that, for instance, all kinds of democracies that really aren't that democratic, they are very vulnerable to influence of big corporations, and especially winner-takes-all electoral systems like they have in the UK, like they have in the USA, like they have in Canada, like they have in Australia. And I'm half British, so I'm allowed to say this, to point this problem out. By the way, our government in the Netherlands is far from perfect either, as the case of the fossil fuel subsidies has proven. So what happens if you have a winner-takes-all political system, like especially the USA has? Because in the USA, if you really want to vote all you can, like because you think, hey, I'm going to be a good citizen, I want to vote in our elections, then you have about 20 elections to participate in over the course of 4 years, all kinds of elections. And if you then look at the top priorities for the average citizen, then, okay, what would be the top priority for the average citizen? Number 1, it would be the economy. That's from Pew Research Institute. Number 5 is gun control. Okay, this is the wrong way around, sorry. Number 4 is healthcare. Number 3 is foreign policy. Number 2 is terrorism. And then something else. Number 12 is the environment. So if in your election, the environment is this low on your priority list, then you never get around to it. So you have a bad democracy, actually. So in a particular case, does it help to sue Shell to really go target the company, for instance? Does that help? Well, I would say as long as the business model is there, then no, that will not help. Because the business model that oil deep in the ground is calling out to business people above ground, hey, I have power here, dig for me. Dig me up, sell me, sell the dream, make a lot of profit. And even if we are totally sustainable here in the Netherlands, then that won't help because other countries won't be sustainable. And Shell will move, or has moved already, of course, to the UK. But even if you go after Shell all over the world, then maybe Shell, all the money will flee from Shell. The money will go somewhere else in another company, which will still dig up the oil, will still dig up the coal, etc. So we need to destroy the business case for linearity. And we do not need to do that in one country. We do need to do that overall. So how do we achieve that? Well, for instance, true pricing, that would help. So within a country, you say, okay, all the products that are sold on our market, they should have true pricing to determine their cost, the true cost. So for instance, carbon tax is the easiest way because the carbon tax is already investigated quite a lot. It's easy to measure actually, like the total energy that is put into a product. But overall true pricing would be even better, but it's much more complicated. So this is the unregulated market decision tree. And this would be if we have good democracies that set up true pricing, because that's what you need to do then you have another decision-making tree that starts with, for instance, the happiness, the desirability. Then it looks at the future, whether a product is future-proof. Then it looks whether it's technologically feasible. Then it looks at economically viable. And then it looks at sufficiently scalable. And all the time, if the answer is no, that the democratic market decision tree says stop, or it slows down, or whatever. But to have a better democracy, then, for instance, those winner-takes-all countries, for instance, could make the step towards proportional representation, like all the happiest countries in the world have. But even our democracy here in the Netherlands could be better. Like there's this book, Against Elections, which says citizens' assemblies would lead to a better democracy. So the subtitle of this book is A Case for Democracy. But another type of a better democracy is that if you leave people, you give people a lot of freedom to choose their occupation. And for instance, you do that by partly saying, okay, you don't have to work for your money, for a part of your money at least, but you have the freedom to invest in our society the way you see fit, personally. And this is kind of a counter argument against what they call bullshit jobs, that you have a job, there's a business model for it. So you go and do a job, but you don't feel really right about the overall goal of the company you're working for. But you say, hey, I need to make a living. So therefore you work for Shell, you work for Heineken, you work for companies that are overall not morally as acceptable as you would like. And by the way, I worked 2 years for Heineken. Sorry. So I know what it's like. And the last point I would like to make is that Rutger Bregman makes a good case that basically humans are, most people are mostly good. Humans are basically decent people. While we have systems of government, we have an economic system that says, okay, selfishness, all people are more or less selfish. So the way our system works is based on selfishness. Sorry, I have a bad English day. So to summarize, I would say we need more more societies with proportional representation, because that is already better. It's much better than winner takes all societies. I investigated this a lot, so I looked at 155 countries that have different systems of governments, and I especially zoomed in on 25 representative countries. And in pink, you can see all countries that have proportional representation. In blue, you can see all countries that have winner takes all. And these are ranked on basis on the average happiness of countries. But also it looks at the environmental impact of the lifestyle of these countries. And here you can see, for instance, the way governments change in the USA. That is always with more and more conflicts with government changes. Here you can see how governments change in the Netherlands, for instance, in the last 70 years. So it's more stable, actually. Okay, I already talked about this. I see that time-wise I have to hurry up. Here you have the 12 top priorities for voters in the United States. Like, there's a lot of issues that they have to think about. If you look then at the Netherlands, how we solve these issues, that we kind of settled a lot of them. So we have to look at fewer issues when we go to the voting booth. Here you can see how the happiness of those 155 countries is distributed. Like, you can see that in the top quintile of the happiest countries, there's much more proportional representations, and there are fewer winner-takes-all countries. And on the unhappiest countries in the world, there's a lot more of these winner-takes-all countries. And actually, it's better. It might even be better to have no democracy than dysfunctional democracy. That's my conclusion, more or less. So in the middle, you see the black and the red there. Those are not democracies. And actually, the average happiness scores are higher if you don't have a democracy. Here's whether you have an executive head of state versus a ceremonial head of state. So an executive head of state has power. Like, the president in the United States has a lot of power. And again, you can see that executive heads of state, they are not so often represented in the happiest quintile. They are overrepresented in the unhappiest quintile. So ceremonial leads to happier countries. It doesn't even matter whether you have a king or a president. That doesn't matter, but it matters whether that head of state is executive or ceremonial. And then if you combine those two, like your head of state and the way you fill your parliament, then you can see even clearer the picture that the systems that kind of look like we have in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Norway, etc. New Zealand is a very interesting case because they changed their system just 30 years ago, and they now become one of the happiest countries in the world. Then you can again see that the happier and more sustainable, relatively more sustainable countries have systems that kind of look like ours. But even better would be to have or I expect it would be better to have a citizens' assembly as a big part of our government. And this is the reason why Extinction Rebellion has as 3 main demands. Like, one is be honest. Sorry, this one is in Dutch. Second, do what is necessary. And thirdly, let citizens decide through citizens' assemblies. So let citizens decide about a just transition.
David, if I may intervene, are you almost at the end? Because we would like to leave some room for discussion.
Yeah, 3 slides to go.
Okay.
Yeah. So my conclusion is what we need to achieve a high level of sustainable happiness for all is not less, but more democracy. So these are 3 books that I highly advise. Against the Collections, A Case for Democracy. Secondly, utopia for realists, because it's all about increasing the level of democracy. And thirdly, humankind. So that's my story. I'll go back to this slide, it's maybe more interesting.
Thank you very much. It was indeed very quick.
Yeah.
I will give you a real hand, and there might be some virtual hands as well. But thank you very much, David, for sharing your insights and also your ideas about how we can move to a more sustainable future. I'm also quite sure there must be questions about this. So I'll just like to open the floor. So either just open your mic and say something, or raise a hand if you have a question. It always takes time for people to think about these questions and raising hands. But there's Martin. Hi.
They've all fallen asleep.
No.
Thanks for the presentation, David. So I have a question. Maybe you have some thoughts on this. So I think most of the people watching this presentation are researchers. So what do you think we can do to contribute to a more sustainable society besides doing our research? But how can we influence these things as well?
Well, for instance, if you look at my presentation, and I really realized this when I was making this presentation for you. Hey, I'm muted.
I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
It says in my screen that I'm muted, but okay. Actually, my story is more about ideas and probabilities and likelihoods and thoughts, and not as much about proof. So here's something. If you're researchers, maybe you can look at some of the ideas that I propose and find proof, and maybe disprove, because I'm not saying that all my ideas are correct. I'm not sure. I'm uncertain, and I'm looking to be challenged about these ideas. So there's something you can do. One of my cases, I think about, I mentioned 4 cases that I thought were bad cases of circularity, but maybe look at 100 cases where people say, okay, we're doing something great for society because we're being more circular, we are recycling and whatnot, and then really quantify whether this is actually a positive impact on society or not.
Okay, thanks.
And it's not easy, because if it was easy, I would have done it.
Yeah.
I have also a question. The books that you present here and the case that you have for, let's say, having an alternative system to the current democracy that we have, that's one way of approaching this issue. Another way of approaching is that at a certain moment you were talking about unregulated markets. Now, of course, markets are not at all unregulated, especially in the US, which is always given as an example of the free market, which is the most regulated market in the world, I think. It's just a matter of putting the regulations in the right place and having the incentives in the right spot. So you could argue, well, we don't need all this. We just need the government to make the right decisions in let's say, for example, if we want to have more circularity, then it makes sense to have recycled content measures. It might make sense to have a tax on materials and energy. I mean, for example, if you look at the climate issue, if we would have a carbon price of $300 a ton, then the world would look very different from what it looks today in terms of energy mix, for example. So the market economists and the people that believe in markets and in regulated markets, because I think nobody really believes in totally unregulated markets, could argue, well, it's just a matter of having the right regulations and the right incentives in place. And then within these boundaries, the free market is, well, the best that we have in terms of optimizing the system that provides the services and the goods that we want to have. Well, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, there's one word in your story that I'm questioning. That's the word just. Like it's easy. It's not easy at all to have the right regulations. I gave the example already about looking at the weight for the recycled content. So that's actually the wrong incentive to simply look at weight. So it becomes, then you have to make it more complex all the time, but then it's really a complicated regulation at a certain moment. And who influences this regulation? Well, then, unfortunately, the people sitting at the table are industry partners. So, well, here in Dordrecht, we have a perfect case, a perfect storm. We have Gemoer. And for 70 years, they have slowed down regulation. They, like a local government, is looking at the short term. Okay, we have a lot of people working here in this company, so we have to make sure that these people keep working here. And to get this, just getting this regulation through is actually a very complicated issue. It simply takes too much time. And then, of course, you say, rightly say, like the United States is the most regulated market in the world. Yes, but who sits at the table there to determine the regulations? Those are the vested partners, the vested interests. They have, you of course, you have, what's it called again? Oh, tweedism. There's a system called tweedism, which says, okay, the people may choose the elected official, but I, as a big and powerful individual or company or whatever, I am going to decide for you who you can choose from. And if you have the 2020 election, that's exactly what happened. Because Bernie Sanders was much more of an environmental conscious person, of course, than Biden was. But the system kind of made sure that he wasn't going to be one of the two last candidates standing.
Apart from the fact that he would obviously have lost the election, but
I'm not too sure. You say that,
no?
and all the time, for instance, the people that or the news companies, the commercial news companies says, okay, what he does is the same as Venezuela. What Bernie Sanders proposes is the same as Cuba. It has never worked. Well, if you look at what Bernie Sanders actually said in reality, was all the time referring to Denmark. But that was not the story what the average citizen would hear. So you say he would have lost the election. Indeed, he might have lost the election, but he would have lost the election because the commercial news companies would all the time repeat the story, this is Venezuela. So there, the system is selecting the candidate.
Yeah, well, I think we can have a long discussion about that. I'm not sure that was the only thing. I think also it's very problematic in a country like the US to have a candidate that is so far left, let's say, if you want to, because what you need to do is to convince this small group of people that is kind of, because the rest is already either Republican or Democrat, and there's just a small group of people that are still open for discussion. And then it would be very problematic to have somebody that is very close to, far to from the middle, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah, I would really like to respond to this, René, because this is the issue. They have, this is actually a total, what I said, okay, how can I summarize this in half an hour?
Yeah.
So if you have a winner-takes-all political system, this always becomes a two-party system. If you take a long enough time, so you can really look at the parliaments of all the winner-takes-all parliaments in the world, and they are already, or they are becoming, two-party systems. And once you have a two-party systems, what happens then is that the road from somebody who is unknown to the general public to becoming a candidate for one of the two parties, that's a long and winding road.
Yeah.
But the chance of becoming a candidate to becoming actually the person in power, that's almost a 50% chance.
Yeah.
So
no, I don't disagree with that. The system as it is in the US is very problematic. It is, but I think that I would also like to say that if we are looking for solutions for the problems that we are confronted with today, which we have to solve within 30 years or so, I don't think that we will achieve to have a completely different political system in the US in that time period. It might be something that we would like to have, but I'm not sure how to get it. Do you then believe that we would be able to change the system within that period?
Well, I'll tell you differently. I don't believe we can achieve a high level of sustainable happiness for many if we don't. Mm-hmm. I don't believe this system can come up with really truly sustainable solutions. I think the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses of the world will keep increasing our footprint overall. So I'm turning this around. Okay, now you say to me, you're making the point like it's difficult to overturn the system in the United States. I agree with you, that's difficult, but it's not like it has not happened before, because in the 1930s, then we had, of course, Roosevelt. So the issues that we have today, we experience today, especially in the United States, that happened before about 90 years ago. And then at the end, the people chose, they gave a landslide victory to Roosevelt, and he changed a lot of things. He failed to do one thing. He did not change the electoral system. That's what he should have done, actually, in his time. But okay, he missed that opportunity. But he had a landslide victory. He had both houses, so the House of Representatives, and he had the Senate, and that and super majorities in both those houses. That has not happened in centuries, but it has happened before. Okay, but now going back, to overturn the United States system, okay, I find that's hard to believe. But to change the system in, for instance, the UK, I think that is achievable. And why do I say that? Because the frustrations after Brexit are huge, especially in Scotland. And Scotland has a parliament which is proportional representation, except the one thing, that their system of proportional representation, their parliament, is not very powerful. It's the parliament in Westminster is actually has more power than the parliament they have in Scotland. But the frustration there is very high, and I believe that they can push for really reform in the UK. And once you have reform in the UK, then the UK is, of course, strongly connected to Canada, is strongly connected to Australia. The head of states of the UK is also the head of state in Canada and Australia. There are a lot of connections there. So no, straight ahead going to the USA and say you have to do it differently, I think that's pointless. That's not what I call a sweet spot. But perhaps Scotland is. So that's what I kind of hope for.
Yeah, thanks. I think that answered the question quite okay. And then still, I mean, the question. What I think I'm talking about scarce resources that we use in all kinds of applications, etc. And I always say, well, the most scarce resource that we have is time. We have to turn around this system within 30 years if we want to tackle climate change. And therefore, we would, from a technology perspective, I always say, well, we have to work with the technologies that are basically on the market now or are close to market within the next 10 years. And of course, before that, we should think about reducing energy demand, et cetera, all the low-hanging fruits, and because that is the most efficient way forward in any case. But that also means that I think that, well, we have to work with the political system as kind of it is, and maybe change a little bit here and there. But if we want to solve this problem, we have to work within the systems that are in place at the moment. And I'm happy to talk about how we could turn it around or what other things we could do. But I'm afraid it would just take too much time.
Yeah, well, my mother's life motto was hurry slowly.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of my point. I think
Yeah.
if we do it with the system that we have, then maybe, for instance, the issue with climate change will be solved, but will be killed off by something else, like artificial intelligence going bad, or some kind of other issue, because it's in a broad scale, it's all the same kind of issues that our system can't find solutions to, and we will be killed off by one thing or another if we don't change the system. So that's the reason why Extinction Rebellion really puts this high on the list, the priority list.
Yeah.
And well, we're having a bit of success, René. I don't know whether you've noticed last week, but
yeah. Yeah, no,
like for instance,
very well done.
Yeah.
Very supportive of it. No,
Well,
that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing with, for instance, the fossil fuel subsidies, which is really real, we put that on the agenda, and we had government really look at it. And then, for instance, somebody who already says, okay, I'm all for the energy transition, like D66 Rob Jetten. He says, okay, I'm for the energy transition, but he completely ignored this the last 4 years, right? And we put it on there, and we fought for that, and it happened.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, but that is within the system as it is, right? The kind of battles that you've invented.
No, because we really challenged the system by sitting on the A12 and say, you can't ignore us. We're sitting here challenging the system.
Yeah, but we haven't changed the political system in the Netherlands in that sense, did we? Yeah.
No, not yet in that case.
Okay,
but we're going to do. We're not finished.
No, I completely agree that for the long term, I think all these different ways of looking at society and democracies, I think they're very interesting. And like you say, it makes sense to think about these, and it makes sense to. It takes a long time to make this happen. I think, except for, I mean, if something terrible happens, then things can maybe change much faster. But it does make sense to start already, because if you don't start, it will never happen. So it's important to think about this stuff, right? So
that's true. I just wanted to make another case, by the way. I just realized that I'm missing another case. Like, why do we have Utopia for Realists on this page? Why do we have that? Well, you can look at it from one side, like if you give people free money, then they have more time free to do the right thing. And people tend to do that. If they have really spare time, they want to make themselves useful. Like here in the Extinction Rebellion Drechtstede, about half of the people that are part of our organization are actually people who are retired. They have free time, and they think, oh, okay, what I'm going to do with my time? I'm going to do something useful. Okay, now I'm going to look at it from a different perspective. You know Yuval Noah Harari, the philosopher? Okay,
yes.
Well, one of the points he makes is like in the past, each time there was more automation, then that freed up time from people to do something on a higher level. Like if we have the mundane tasks and a machine does that for us, well, we'll do something else. We do something, for instance, more creative or more versatile, whatever. But one of the cases he makes is, okay, at a certain point, this will end, because then machines do everything better than we humans can. And I think last year with ChatGPT, for instance, artificial intelligence, that even in the field of creativity, machines do a pretty good job, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we are close to the situation where actually doing work, because we need people to do work, is finished. So that means we have to rethink about what it means to do work. So that means that we have to rethink this issue. We have all kinds of people who have free time, who can put that in the spend that time in the best way they think is useful for society, which is another way of increasing the level of our democracy. So my case here is that some of these changes that I mentioned, of course, they seem really hard, but it depends on the situation in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Maybe something happens that makes it easy, and then you should realize, I think, that this is important and grab the opportunity, because that's what Roosevelt failed to do. I think he did not realize how important it was to change the system when he could, because he had super majorities.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think great insights and also great many items that are food for thought, I would say. So thanks for joining us today. We did come to the end of the time that we have available for this, but I think we could talk about this much longer. Maybe we will meet each other at some point in real life, and we can have a coffee and discuss it further. Thank you very much, and thank you all for participating, and hope to see you all next time. Bye bye.
Zullen we nog even napraten? Silke?
Ja, ik ben even aan het kijken of ik de recording kan stopzetten.